Luis Enrique unleashed a high-speed, no-ego revolution that tore through Europe. With a 5-0 destruction of Inter in the Champions League final, the highest margin of win in the history of competition finals. This wasn't slow evolution. It was a footballing coup that broke traditional European rules and rewrote its own fate. During the 21st century, PSG chased European validation with a Hollywood blueprint, megastar arrivals, Instagram hype, and all the tactical cohesion of a halftime show. The project, backed by Nasser Al-Khelaifi after 2011, was obsessed with symbolism. Zlatan Ibrahimovic's bravado, Neymar's flair, Messi's gravitas, and of course, the prodigal son, Kylian Mbappe. Despite the glitter, the spine was brittle. Tactically, under previous managers, they always lacked coherence in both pressing structures and defensive structures. Under Thomas Tuchel and Mauricio Pochettino, the front three rarely engaged in structured pressing phases. Defensive transitions were always porous, with vast spaces between the lines and little support from the midfield. It wasn't uncommon to see a 4-3-3 on paper turn into a disjointed 4-2-4 in practice, which exposes the fullbacks and exhausting pivot in front of opponents. On top of that, the squad's reliance on moments rather than the team's momentum made them vulnerable to better drilled sides. The 2020 final against Bayern and the collapse against Real Madrid, or that famous 6-1 humiliation at home by Enrique's Barcelona, are some highlights. When their plan A failed, which was to give the ball to the stars, it looked like they never had a plan B. The deeper and more evident problem they had all these years was that they never truly played like a team. Despite having Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe in the team, the roles were unclear. Messi used to drop too deep to compensate for Mbappe, who would drift wide to isolate the fullback. When the attacks failed in these situations, Mbappe rarely came back for defense, and midfielders had to overcompensate, which caused burnout and inconsistency against ruthless teams of Europe. By 2024, with no Champions League to show for their investments, and when Mbappe also left, whom they'd gave all the powers to in the club, PSG faced a choice: continue chasing names or rebuild identity. That vacuum is where Luis Enrique stepped in. He brought football ideology with him instead of overdependence on stars. Stay tuned, because towards the end of the video, we'll be discussing the structure and transformation that led to the 5-0 win against Inter Milan in the Champions League finals in Munich. From day one, Lucho was very clear with his plans in Paris. In his first season with Mbappe, he emphasized team values more than convincing Mbappe to stay at PSG. He demanded pressing intensity from every individual to get better in structure without the ball. The idea was that players like Mbappe, Vitinha, and Dembele can always hurt the opponent with the ball. However, they had a huge setback when Mbappe also left because he wanted to win the Champions League. Or maybe Enrique wasn't giving him the star treatment he was used to.
Yo te he leído que te gustaba Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan cogía de los huevos a todos sus compañeros y se ponía a defender como un hijo de puta. Tú tienes que dar ese ejemplo primero como persona y como jugador de ir a presionar. Vas a tener a Cuba, sí, vas a ser tú.
So, after Mbappe, they focused on indigenous French players. Enrique wanted to play vertical football with fluid movements. His on-paper 4-3-3 structure often shuttles into a 3-2-5 when both left-backs charge high on the pitch to create spaces in the defense. In these cases, Vitinha drops deeper in defense and Dembele acts as a false nine to connect the defense and offense. With this structure, the opponent is already on the back foot before the start of the game. Now they can either sit low block to defend or want to match the press of PSG to hurt them in transitions. However, more than the structure, it was the intensity of movement that defined this new PSG. Their off-the-ball runs weren't just about stretching the pitch, they created domino effects. That means when wide attackers made decoy runs into open inside lanes, the central midfielders frequently attacked the half spaces. The cherry on top of everything was Luis Enrique's pressing. They press man-to-man with a very high intensity. The forwards initiate the press by suffocating the opponent's goalkeeper. That's a high risk, but when the whole team is playing together to compensate for it, the approach gave them fruitful results. Apart from tactics, ego was ruthlessly managed within the team. No player was an automatic starter, and no defensive liabilities were tolerated. There was no star player at all. A starter has to adapt or be replaced by hungrier, tactically intelligent alternatives. This shifted the psychological culture, and players competed for roles based on understanding the system, not on seniority or reputation. So, at the end, it wasn't just a tactical upgrade. They changed their complete philosophy. PSG finally played as a unit, with a pattern rehearsed in training, rather than relying on inspiration in the moment. This improved the team as a whole and transformed the performance of the main players. The great thing about football or any team sport is that when 11 players play like one body, the system enhances their individual abilities. That's how Lucho repurposed his players with new roles. It's never about signing the best, it is always about extracting the most from the ones who are willing to improve. The main man is Ousmane Dembele, traditionally a chaotic winger, but Enrique converted him into a false nine. Instead of hugging the touchline, Dembele dropped between the lines, dragging defenders and initiating combination plays. His ambidexterity, which means he can play equally well with both his feet, allowed him to receive in tight spaces, turn under pressure, and line up with the midfield. This created vertical channels for runners like Desiree Doué, Barcola, or Kvaratskhelia. If you want to know more about the heroics of Dembele this season, watch our video, which analyzes his position as Ballon d'Or runner this season. Dembele's attacking partner, Desiree Doué, was the season's tactical revelation. Operating as a hybrid between numbers 8 and 10, he interpreted Enrique's positional game with uncanny maturity. He didn't just pass to his teammates, he manipulated the space, often ghosting into unmarked zones. Doué served as the press-resistant core PSG had lacked for years. His ability to transition from defense to attack with 2 touches made him essential in breaking high presses. Then came Kvaratskhelia in the winter window, a player often associated with flair, now redefined through discipline. Enrique simplified his role. Rather than taking on 3 defenders, Kvaratskhelia made intelligent diagonal runs, pulled wide to open space centrally, and dropped into midfield when needed. He retained his unpredictability, but within a defined structure, maximizing attacking threats at just the right moments. In midfield, Vitinha evolved into a metronome. Alongside João Neves, the pair formed a rotating pivot. One held, the other advanced. Their chemistry and positional awareness enabled seamless transitions. The duo knows each other well in Portugal and at PSG. When this duo combined with Fabian Ruiz, they formed a press-resistant midfield that is too hard to contain. The more amazing thing is that none of these players were faces of the franchise in the traditional sense, but together they've delivered a campaign for ages. Let's analyze their road to the Champions League final. PSG's road to the Champions League final didn't begin with dominance. Rather, the early signs were disappointing. The group stage exposed the weakness of the newly assembled unit. They lost 2-0 to Arsenal, 2-1 to Atletico Madrid, 1-0 to Bayern, and managed only a 1-1 draw against PSV. So, out of the first 5 matches, they won only 1 against Girona and lost 3. That 1 point against weak PSV kept the hope alive. Otherwise, it was all over before it even started. However, they won the next 3 matches against Man City, Salzburg and Stuttgart, defeated Brest 3-0 in the qualifying round for the playoffs, and entered the round of 16 against title favourites Liverpool. Till then, Luis Enrique has completed all of his experiments. In the early matches, they looked down and out, but the analysts knew the coach was trying to find his ideal combination. Once he found the rhythm, we saw a chaotic night in Parc des Princes. Against an in-form Liverpool, PSG put on a show that baffled every football pundit on the planet. Liverpool just got lucky with a 1-0 victory, but they were bruised with 27 shots from the Parisians. This dominance was continued in the second leg when they won 1-0 against Liverpool at home. And after that, it was a masterclass by Donnarumma in the penalty box, who saved crucial shots, and PSG advanced 4-1 on penalties. The quarterfinals against Aston Villa offered a mix of brilliance and vulnerability. PSG were dazzling at home, winning 3-1 with high pressing and lightning counters. But in the second leg, Unai Emery's Villa pulled PSG into chaos and won the match 3-2. Enrique's side held their nerve with a crucial goal line clearance and won the tie 5-4 on aggregate. It was a reminder that this team, unlike the old PSG, does not crumble when shaken under pressure. In the semi-final, they faced Arsenal, a tactically rigid, press-resistant, and patient team. Enrique exploited that patience. He overloaded the half spaces, using Doué and Vitinha to drag Rice and Odegaard into wide zones. An early goal by Dembele in the first leg was the only fireworks, and both teams started to prepare for a firm hit in the second leg. However, PSG didn't give them any chance at Parc des Princes and sealed the deal with a 2-1 win. In that match too, they exploited half spaces, which Hakimi used and scored the winning goal. So, after a tough initial round and testing knockouts, they were all ready to go for a war for the continental treble in the last match of the season. However, no one expected a 5-0 Champions League final. What we saw wasn't just dominance, it was thumping with real authority. Inter Milan, under Simone Inzaghi, had entered the final boasting one of Europe's most compact defensive units. But within the first 20 minutes, their structure was in ruins. It seemed like Inter came to play the final, but PSG came to tear through their opponent. The kickoff was in fact a statement that many football fans may have missed. PSG kicked the ball away in Inter Milan's half and gave their possession easily for a goal kick. However, it wasn't given out for nothing. From there, a relentless press was started that forced Jan Sommer to play long balls instead of build-up from behind, which Inter did all season. They put the pressure on the centre-backs, who struggled in transitional scenarios. This put cracks in Inter's defense, which was exploited well by the creative work of Dembele and the midfield. By the 20th minute, Inter was 2-0 down and chasing the game from far behind. Tactically, it was a masterclass in manipulation. In possession, PSG used a 3-2-5 shape, with Vitinha co-orchestrating the midfield tempo. Off the ball, they remained true to their 4-3-3 formation, where Dembele sprinted to press Sommer, and the wingers were pressing the two centre-backs in Inter's 3-5-2 formation. Their pressing effectively diffused the threats from Barella, Çalhanoğlu, Mkhitaryan, who were usually the heartbeat of Inzaghi's possession-based play. In the second half, Enrique slowed the tempo, shifting to a control-first approach, but even then, they struck 3 times in transitions and direct play. Inter had no answers. The final whistle marked the most one-sided result in Champions League final history. They ended their European domination in some style, and it was the announcement of a new era, which Nasser Al-Khelaifi had been looking for the last 15 years. The irony is that it came in the season when they'd hoped the least for it. PSG finally won the Champions League, right after ditching every superstar they once prayed to be in the club. It turned out, when no one's walking around waiting for Instagram highlights, football gets easier. Luis Enrique didn't manage egos because there weren't any left to manage. In the end, PSG only needed one thing to conquer Europe: to stop being PSG. They made it sure with the demolition in the final.